Well, once again, I'm back, and thanks to Radio Hope, Mike Myers, for joining me to end the first part of today's podcast. The second part is something that's been on my heart for a long time since I read about it, the GoFundMe for sportscasters. Yes, we want entertainment. We want baseball back. They're doing antibody testing, and I'm going to ask my next guest, David Saltzman, who's actually been the spearhead of this GoFundMe. David, welcome in.
Thanks so much, Alex. Good to be with you.
First of all, how is everything in Texas? I mean, we don't hear much about the rates there. We don't hear much about whether they're stay in place or not. What's going on in Texas?
Well, first, all thoughts with you and everyone in New York, who, of course, has just been devastated by this. In Texas, the numbers are high, not near what they've been in the New York, New Jersey area and places in the Northeast. I live in Austin, which is in Central Texas, and the reported numbers, and of course it doesn't include all the testing that has not been done. So as you well know, no one knows the exact numbers. But Austin is in Travis County, and the number of confirmed cases just reached over 1,000. So definitely far fewer than what's been reported up there. As far as we're concerned here, there's a shelter in place for at least the next few weeks. Everyone's expecting that that's going to be extended, as well as schools being canceled for the rest of the semester. But from what I can see, although not everyone's following the orders, I think most people are. And like up there, hopefully, as the curve continues to flatten, we can somehow get to some small sense of normalcy sooner rather than later.
Do you guys do the 7 o'clock cheer, 8 o'clock your time, like we do here in New York Eastern?
No, we don't. It's still moving what you're all doing for all the healthcare workers and everyone that's going into this each and every day. Nothing like that here, but, certainly thoughts are with all the healthcare professionals here. They're not having to deal with it near at the level you are, but certainly they are busier than they normally are.
Now, as you probably know, a lot of us who work in sports, I do production work for Seton Hall basketball, and I help run the board when we do St. John's on our radio station. By the way, to have them play one half and then cancel was just unreal. But when all of these sports tournaments got canceled, all of our hearts sank. And then you do point out how the livelihoods of sportscasters during this were affected big time. Now, obviously, the economy is so weak right now, yet I know that sportscasters need to sustain yourself. So how has the results been of your GoFundMe, and what is your hope with it? In addition to economic, is it to provide hope also to sportscasters that they will get through this?
Anyone who is in sports production, so not just on-air guys like myself. In full disclosure, sports is a second job for me. So I'm fortunately going to be fine, and the GoFundMe is not for me, but it's for those, whether it's on air or whether it's behind the scenes. And I would even argue that the behind-the-scenes people have the hard job. Play-by-play guys like me have the easy job. I'm not having to get there so early and leave so late, and one mistake that I could make affects the whole broadcast. But, I'll tell you a story, and this was kind of in my head as I decided to put the GoFundMe together. It was I believe it was November. I was actually doing a championship game for Southland Conference volleyball. I was in Arkansas, and I was talking to one of our production guys before we would go on the air. And the night before, he was in Dallas helping out with the Dallas Stars game. And the next day, he was going to go to Nashville to do a Nashville Predators game. And he talked to me about all these travels. And I looked at him and I said, wow, I mean, on one hand, it must be so exciting to go to different place, but I hope you really love what you're doing with how hard you're working. And his answer was, I do love what I do each and every day. And then he said, but I need the money. And that struck me that he was working, and I'm 46 and he's older than me, and he's still going to all these different places, so many different days of the week, just to do his work so he can get by. And that conversation stuck with me when all this happened just over a month ago. I was even doing Southland Conference basketball when that conference tournament was canceled, so I was in a way in the middle of it. But I thought of him and so many others that I've worked with, and similar to all those who you've worked with in the past, who all of a sudden their source of revenue is gone, and to no fault of their own, of course. So I thought, goodness, if there's just a little bit that I can do to put something together just to help those like them in some way, then it's certainly worth it. So it's not just for the on-air people; it's for anyone, audio, cameramen, engineers, producers, directors, anyone involved in this industry who could use a little help. Certainly that's what this is for.
And I donated because I am in that fight. I support everybody in that fight, and I just still have, luckily, a production job in radio, so thank God for that. Right now. But let me tell the listeners, if you're not sure, there are freelance engineers that go game to game, and that's kind of how they live, right, David? I mean, there aren't always full-time engineers. There's really a game-by-game basis for some.
Yeah, so for most of these people, they are aligned with certain production companies. And so they're typically, when I do games for, whether it's the Southland, and I'll do games on ESPN3, a lot of games at the University of Houston, some at SMU. So they're all what's called packaged games, where production companies are hired by ESPN to pretty much put them on. And so then those production companies are hiring all these other people, everyone who's involved with the production. But they are not full-time employees of that company. They are strictly independent. They are strictly 1099. And so it goes back to the example of the one person I mentioned, where they're looking to be linked to as many companies as possible, so that when they have these games, they are asked to help in some way, shape, or form, and that is how they make their money. So all of a sudden, now the production companies obviously are hurting too, but these individuals who were dependent on these games, that source of revenue is gone.
Well, Doc Emmerich gave a little homage to the truck when he mentioned it in his video about hockey, and I thought that was very moving. So, David, they're doing the antibody testing in Major League Baseball right now, and I kind of have been thinking, well, if they do get games back, obviously they'll have to have the announcers. Obviously they'll have to have the engineers, but I haven't heard that they're doing antibody tests for the guys that are bringing the game on the air. Have you?
No, you're ahead of that compared to me. I wonder even, there are REMI broadcasts that are available. So do they even send the broadcasters to the sites, or do they do them from one certain area, which could lead to better protection for them? And then even so, if these broadcasts are being done in these localized areas, do they bring every single play-by-play voice and analyst for each and every team, or do they condense those crews? I actually talked to a TV voice of an NBA team yesterday, and he expressed those concerns where, if somehow the season resumes in the NBA and they do these in small areas, are they going to need every voice of a particular team, or do they condense those crews down? And if they do condense, then that's going to leave some people out who are hoping to be able to get some more games in this year.
Well, I don't know if you know the name Bob Wolf, but I'm sure you do because you're in the sportscast world. He, of course, was the legendary broadcaster who called Don Larson's Perfect Game. Well, in his book, he wrote about how he got stuck in New York due to a snowstorm, and he did a Knicks Cincinnati Royals, I think, or Monarch, one of them, basketball game from the Empire State Building. So it can be done.
What a view, huh?
I know.
How did he pull that off?
Well, because I guess they fed him the FX, and then he just did it as if he was at the game, which is pretty cool. So, remote
That's awesome.
Possibilities are there, and we're seeing all our TV anchors and crew on all our news networks at home anyway. So maybe that is a possibility.
Yeah, and obviously, as you well know, all these leagues are looking through so many different scenarios. With the antibody testing, that isn't even proof positive yet, right? So we're in such the early stages, and I'm with you, right? I mean, we're all, I don't know if desperate's the word, but we're certainly hungry for some sort of sports to start. There's certainly political pressure, it seems, on the NFL to get things going, and I think that's a big reason why they're still having the draft. And that's a pro sports league, so they can hold their players to, even if to be sequestered for a long period of time to get the season going. Perhaps they can do that. Certainly college sports can't, and college presidents and commissioners even told Vice President Mike Pence yesterday that there's going to be no college sports until students are on campus, all students, not just the student athletes. I would actually guess that the NFL is going to go first. I just have a hard time. I just have a hard time seeing NBA, NHL, baseball. Who knows, right? Because there's so many steps that still need to be taken. But number one has to be the safety of the athletes. And until we know that this antibody testing doesn't show so many false negatives, because there's so many different tests out there. There's not even one that's been approved yet officially, right? That I just think it's a while until anything like that's going to happen.
Well, we will have to see. I mean, they were talking at one point August. Now, of course, Los Angeles is saying 2021. Although, I mean, not to get all off the topic here, but when they release studies that say 2022, I don't exactly know if that's healthy to publish either, because, yeah, it's reality, but then that just gets people way down below any what we're dealing. In 2022, no one could handle that. Anyway, so you're doing this for everybody in the broadcast arena, and you've had a lot of feedback, and I know it's inspired people too, right, to do something similar in their area?
So, yeah, it's been nice. So I've been able to help about a dozen people, and about $1,300 has been raised, which has been tremendous. There's a man named Larry Lage. His last name is Lage. Honestly, I don't even know if I'm pronouncing his last name right, but he has been a long-time sports writer for the AP in the Detroit area. So he's done the pros teams in Detroit. He covers Michigan State. He has far more reach than I do. He has 12,000 Twitter followers. I have 900. So what he's done, he's put together a very similar GoFundMe, and that's helped about 100 people from what he told me yesterday, which is terrific. I'm going to keep my GoFundMe going, but certainly there's no competition. If people want to go to his GoFundMe, his Twitter handle is Larry, then Lage, all one word. And there he has the link to his GoFundMe, which has helped a number of people too. So it's been nice that someone like him has been able to start this, because again, he's just due to the number of years on his job and just how many people he knows. He knows far more in the industry than me, that he's been able to help so many people.
Well, I'm praying for, now we're talking about the engineers, I'm praying for Mike Infantino. He's the Seton Hall engineer, and of course, Chris Majkowski, the engineer for Mets baseball and St. John's basketball. I mean, here in New York, it's been a history of Hall of Fame broadcasters, and thankfully I've been able to meet a lot of them and the engineers, and we're all praying for every one of them. And I know you might have heard our New York Post photographer passed away at 48 because of Corona. I mean, Anthony Causey. This is real, people, and I do think the minute they canceled everything, I thought stopping the spread was the right thing to do. We canceled it to stop the spread, and I agree with that. If we didn't do that, who knows how long this could have gone. So I'm praying that helped. All right, David, so to sustain our listeners, tell us some favorite sports memories of calling games, because I know that's what's getting people through right now.
Wow, on the spot. So, there's so many. That's such a great question. I used to do radio at Rice, and they actually made it. They actually won over 20 games one year. They had 3 last-second victories, which was terrific. I haven't done games on such a high level that maybe the fans there in New York would be able to remember. But I actually called for ESPN News Chris Beard's first big win at Texas Tech. It was an overtime win over West Virginia, who was number 7 at the time. They hit a last-second 3, 177-76. The court was stormed. It was the most surreal experience I've ever had as a broadcaster. I never had anything like that. What's funny is that, college basketball fans across the country now know Chris due to Texas Tech's success from last season, and he's done an amazing job in Lubbock. We actually had him on right after the game ended. He came to talk to us, and so we asked him some questions. Now, it's not like on radio when the play-by-play person can be in charge of the broadcast and in the interview on his own or on her own. I'm having to listen to our producer tell me when to stop the interview. So we're asking a question, and then another question, and then another. We actually get to 5 questions, and I'm thinking to myself, shouldn't we stop this interview? And after question 5, because I'm still going because I have not been told to stop, Chris, and he was very kind about it, he said, guys, I'm so glad I've been able to talk to you, but I'm ready to go celebrate with my team. And he yanks the headset off and puts it down and just gets up and leaves. And we handled it well, I thought. And quite honestly, I was surprised he didn't do that sooner. But that was kind of an early for the nation, because that was a win that got national publicity. That was kind of a first glimpse into Chris's personality. I mean, what you see, if you've seen a game and you see him on the sideline, it's all real, it's all honest. It's why his players love him. But it was great to be able to be there, because that gym was half full. They weren't near what they've been the last couple of years. But that was a great memory to be able to kind of see the court storm and get to see his program get their first, I guess, program building win, you can say, long before they were able to make it all the way to the national title game the next year.
Where and of course Virginia had that similar thing where they were knocked out.
Mm-hmm.
They had that motivation going into that, and I mean they did win it, but man, Tech held on and played them pretty well that whole title game.
Yeah, they were great, and Virginia, I actually a few years have been able to fill in over Thanksgiving weekend during the football basketball crossover. And I did Virginia basketball over those weekends during those Thanksgiving tournaments. So a couple were in New York, actually, in Brooklyn at the Barclays Center. I called for Virginia, the game where they held Rutgers to 28 points. That was hard to keep the game to sound exciting when it's a 46-28 win. I'll tell you, though, because, I'll praise Chris Beard up and down. Tony Bennett is the same way, where when you watch him and you see the class he exudes, that is really him. There is nothing fake about him. And that's one, maybe the big reason why he is so beloved, because he's so honest and so genuine. Now, I haven't done a Virginia game in 3 years, but when they lost to UMBC, it broke my heart, only because I knew how great people Tony and his staff and his players were, and to have to go through that. And then, of course, come back the next year and be able to overcome everything they did to win the title. There was no one more deserving of them to be able to have that recovery from all they went through and be able to win that title and have that celebration.
You mentioned Rutgers. Of course, we've been following them up here because they're a local team. And if the tournament was happening, they probably had a great shot to be in it, because look how competitive they were in the Big Ten this year. It was one of the big years for them.
Yeah, what a great job, right? I love those stories, don't you? And I think Texas Tech's another example. Even Virginia, which was kind of flat. So they weren't terrible, but they were never great until Tony's fifth year there, where you see those types of stories where these programs that have great fan bases, and as you well know, I mean, in that area, I mean, Rutgers was starving for any type of success, especially since they moved to the Big Ten. And to be able to have that success in basketball, where I saw a couple of those games where the crowd is just so frenetic, it was like they were letting out years and years of frustration in one season to be able to support their team. And that's one of so many reasons why it's such a shame the season had to be cut off early, because I know Rutgers struggled away from home, but who knows what they would have done. But just the emotion of being able to be in an NCAA tournament for the first time in so long would have been great for them.
Miles Powell, his senior year cut short, and of course he was a legend here in the Tri-State area with the way he would pull Seton Hall through games, and it was just, it's like you want to say it's not fair. But then again, I would say people who say that say, well, you don't understand what the impact was had we continued those tournaments. So it's tough to say that it wasn't fair, but it also feels insensitive to say it wasn't fair, because there was a bigger purpose to what the NCAA did, if that makes sense.
Right. And for all the NCAA gets their criticism, and a lot of it's deserved, frankly, they did the right thing and canceling all spring sports early. I remember vividly. So I'm actually on the air doing the Southland Conference tournament. It was the first round when it was during a break, and I just took a quick look at my phone, and a little alert showed that Rudy Gobert had contracted coronavirus. And it was such an eerie feeling, number one, realizing, wow, it's hit a professional sports league, which now so many more people are going to relate to because they follow the NBA. And it just, not that it isn't real beforehand, but it feels a little more real when it's relatable, when it's someone who you may not know but you follow, like Gobert or any NBA player. And so I see that during a break, and then the game continues. because the tournament hadn't been canceled yet. And it was an eerie feeling the rest of the night because I thought to myself, how can we continue this when players are actually now getting COVID? And who knows how much more it could spread. And, of course, everything got canceled the next day. But the NCAA all of a sudden cancels the spring sports. And that's when, because obviously I had been following what was going on, but that's when it hit me. I thought, if they're canceling the whole spring semester, I need to take this even more seriously than I am already.
Right.
And then when you read more about it and you saw about the exponential growth in these other countries, and then when you saw in the United States at the time, the actual numbers, even when with the lack of testing, was going up 25-30% a day. That means the number doubles every 2-3 days. That's when it hit me that, wow, I think the NCAA did the right thing in getting ahead of it. And I think even others have praised them where they were able to make such a move in advance that I think a lot more people, not just me, but I mean far, far more people, all of a sudden realized, wait a minute, this is something we really have to take seriously. And so I'm driving back to Austin from the Houston area and going, wow, maybe we should stay at home. And that was the first time, because of the NCAA canceling spring sports, as silly as it may sound, that was the first time where I thought, wait a minute, what should we, by we, I mean me, my wife, my kids, friends, what should we be doing, even in the Austin area, to be able to flatten the curve? And so we had a little family over already that weekend, and we did go out to dinner once. And after that, that was it. And so we started staying at home a good couple of weeks before the government here started telling everyone to stay home.
Well, let me ask you this. So, it is eerie, and also prayers for Karl Anthony Towns. He lost his mom, I believe, to corona. I mean, this is a very real thing, and I appreciate you coming on and bringing a human side to sportscasting, because obviously beyond the calls, you guys have a life, and so I guess that's why I loved when Joe Buck posted a picture of his father. He called 50 years later, he called the Niners and the Chiefs, which is what his father called 50 years before. And I thought, this is so human, and now we have this level of human. But I've got to ask, how have you kept in shape? Have you been, doing play-by-play off of TV? Like, have you been replaying games and calling it? How have you been keeping sharp?
No, great question. No, I have not done one game. It's probably good advice where at least I should. But no, my kids are 7 and 5, and so they're still at the age where, well, fortunately they get along most of the time, and that's been a huge help for my wife and I. But yeah, I've done the homeschooling with them. We try to keep them active as much as possible. And then, as I mentioned, sports is a second job for me. I do financial advising, and so that's kept me really busy. What I haven't done near as much of as I should is exercise. All of a sudden we realize, at least here in Austin, we're in the 5th week, our family, of staying at home. And I haven't exercised near as much. So my advice to everyone would be carve out a half hour to try to exercise every day, because it'll catch up to you pretty fast.
Hey, while we're on financial advisement, if you don't mind me going there for a minute, because I'm curious now. SBA loans have been going crazy, and now the stimulus issue. What can you say to calm people down during this? Because obviously they want the stimulus check, they want the loan, but let's not crash the portals, because that's not going to help anybody.
Well, I can only answer that in general terms, where if someone feels like they need it, and if they follow the criteria and they are eligible, then certainly they can look ahead and apply. The thing is that there are certain loans, like the EIDL loan, which isn't even accepting new applicants. So my best advice would be, and I know this is hard, is to be as patient as possible. No one expected this to happen let me rephrase that. No one could prepare to handle everything in a timely fashion as it has happened. I think that's the best way to put it. I mean, there's not enough people, whether it's with the government or with banks who are handling these loans as well. There's not enough people to be able to handle the load of applications that has come in. And they, I imagine, are doing the best they can to be able to process all the loans and the paperwork that they receive. So it's one of those things where it's hard to be patient because so many are dependent on that money. But at the same time, it's going to come to them as fast as possible.
Well, I love that you do more than just one focus in life, and that's great because I feel like that can be applied to sports, right? Why are we telling kids they can only do one sport? They should be told to do multiple sports because that's just the best thing to do, to be well-rounded. But I've got to ask you a couple more things since, obviously, sadly, no one's running to the arena. I know I got a few minutes with you, I think. Tell us about David Saltzman. How did you get into sportscasting for those who do listen to you and may not know that story?
So, my dream was to be the next voice of the Houston Rockets where I grew up, the Texas Longhorns where I went to college, anything like that. Casting high school football games in my head when my older brother was a cheerleader in high school. So it was one of those things where I kind of did it at an early age. And one day I realized, well, maybe I can do this as a profession. So, before I got into financial advising, I was in broadcasting full time and I lived in small towns. I did 1AA sports back in 2000 and 2001. That fell through, and so that's how I started my financial advising practice. But got very lucky in 2007 and became the voice of Rice University, which currently plays in Conference USA. And so that got me back into college, and slowly but surely it's allowed me to grow into TV or whatnot. So I've always wanted to be around sports. I'll even kind of transition to this, and you said the word well-rounded. The one piece of advice that I would give people in our industry, and this is something I did not do, so it's my one regret, or I would say I didn't do it until way later than I should have, is if you are in broadcasting, to be well-rounded. And this is whether it's on air or off air. If you're off air and you're on the technical side, learn as many tricks of the trade as you can. But if you're on air, because I wanted to be in radio, and that's all I did for years and years. And when someone brought up TV, I said, I don't want to do TV. I was pretty stubborn and just told myself I don't need to do TV. And that's a big regret of mine, because in the industry, the more well-rounded you are. So if you're doing radio plus TV, maybe you're writing a blog, the more you're doing, the more people you are getting to know. And as you well know, Alex, the more people you know in this industry, the better chance you are going to have to be able to get games at the level that you want. A big reason why, frankly, I'm able to do some games directly for ESPN. I've done a few for ESPNU the last couple of years. I'm not a heavy hitter, but I am on their list, is frankly because when I was at Rice, the video coordinator there now is in Charlotte working for ESPN, and I kept up with him. I've kept up with everybody. In fact, when I got the Rice job back in 2007, it was because a former a person that I had worked with in Austin over 10 years earlier had become the program director of the first ESPN radio station in Houston, and they were carrying the Rice games. I would have had no idea that the Rice job was available if I didn't keep up with that one person throughout the years. So the networking is important, but you're going to know more people if you do more than just one thing. And if I just did radio, then I would know some people. But now that I've branched out into TV and to other areas of broadcasting, it's exponential. I know far more people than I have, and that I hope is only going to help me continue to get these types of games that I want. So don't be stubborn, be well-rounded, learn as many tricks of the trade as you can, and especially know as many people as you can, because you never know when that connection is going to lead to you to get some type of job that you really want.
Hey, you have such a story. Would you do podcasting during this? Like, give people some more information about, talk about what you're thinking on your own podcast. Have you thought about that yet?
So a little bit, frankly, the financial advising job plus, having to be with my kids. My wife works full time, so she and I are alternating days, and we're with the kids the whole day. And then Tuesdays and Thursdays, we're talking on a Thursday. Those are my days to take calls, and my wife does Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I would love to be able to start that. I just haven't been able to carve out the time to do it yet.
And in addition to those in the industry and how they can sort of stay sharp and I know they will. I mean, they are the best of the best. And by the way, Gary Cohen and the team here for the Mets are doing Periscope live streams of MLB The Show play-by-play, which is pretty neat, actually. But I've got to ask you, what is your advice for up-and-coming sportscasters that are still maybe in college and have had their teachings, their radio shows in college cut short? Like, what do you tell them that's struggling to figure out how they can make it in sports, which is already tough to do, but now add this to it?
Yeah, well, we're right. We just don't know when. My advice would be what I just said is there's one thing to hone your craft. And so when you're just starting out, absolutely listen to every game you do, be as critical as possible, but don't get down on yourself because we're all going to make mistakes very early on. But hone your craft. That is important. But in the long run, it is strictly not as important as getting to know people. I've known quite a few people who are amazing broadcasters. I mean, their play-by-play is, unbelievable at a level far higher than mine. And yet they weren't able to get as far as they wanted to, and it's strictly because they didn't know enough people. They didn't network. I mean, one example would be, because you don't have to get in touch with the same person every week. You don't want to haggle them. But if you're sending out a demo over email to somebody and you don't hear back from them, don't get down, because they're getting demos from so many people. So keep following up. Follow up every 2 to 3 months. Sometimes don't even send a demo. Just say, hey, just wanted to check in. Hope all's well. Very interested in working for you. And then even offer to have a phone conversation. Can we set aside 10 minutes so that I can call you to talk about what you're looking for in someone like myself? You might not get an answer then, so try again another 2-3 months later. Never stop trying to network. And if someone doesn't get back in touch with you, what's another email to send them in 2 to 3 months? It takes virtually no time. And the more people you're doing that with, it's a numbers game. The more people you're doing that with, the better chance that one person is going to get back in touch with you. And that could lead to a connection that can lead to getting games that you want. So again, hone your craft, become as good as you can at play-by-play, color, whatever you're doing, but never stop getting in touch with people. The networking is the number one thing to do if you want to get more and more games or do more and more of what you want to do.
Well, I'm definitely going to listen back to this, because you've got some strong advice and some really great advice for broadcasters, both experienced and up and coming. And one more thing, a couple more things. Where can we find the GoFundMe? What's the webpage? And can I guess we find it through your Twitter?
Yep, so the Twitter's the easiest way. So my Twitter is David Saltzman, all one word, and the last name is spelled Saltzman. The GoFundMe link is pinned, so it's right at the top if you go to my profile, so you can do that. And then I do want to stress, for anyone who can donate, awesome. I've had donations as small as $5, and I had one donate $500. The $500 one obviously was tremendous, but it doesn't matter how much. If you can, then that's wonderful. But I've been a little surprised that I haven't heard from more people who are in need of help. And I know that's a very hard thing to do, but if someone's listening and they're in our industry, and there's, of course, so much uncertainty over when we're going to even have games again, please feel free to reach out. Obviously, I keep everything private. No one's going to know who I'm giving money to. But I created an email to get in touch with me if you do need some help from the GoFundMe, and that is DS GoFundMe, which is one word. So I probably shouldn't have made it that long, but dsgofundme@gmail.com. And please reach out, and everyone that has received some money. And that's the guarantee that I make, that if someone reaches out and says that they need a little help, I don't know how much it's going to be. It obviously depends on how much is donated from here on out, but I guarantee they'll get something.
Well, I definitely started to share this a couple weeks ago, and here we are 2 weeks later, and I got you on. So I'm very happy that you are so accessible to talk about this and to talk about the needs of the sportscasters, the tech teams. I mean, we all say we want sports, but we sometimes forget what goes into bringing sports back, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, absolutely.
No, go for it. Go for it.
Well, no, I just wanted to say thank you for spreading the word because, I mean, as much word that can be spread, hopefully more money can be brought in to be able to help more people. And certainly my thoughts are with everyone having to go through this, but especially those in your area and just how horrible it's been. And yeah, it's been a few years since I've been to New York, but it's my favorite city to visit. My wife and I were actually going to be there in a month. We were going to see Ricky Gervais. I don't know why he hasn't canceled the show yet, but I imagine he will. But we love New York, and the people there are just terrific. And our thoughts are with you all as you continue to go through this.
And we all know nationwide how sports can get us through tragedy. And I'm pretty sure that when this all is lifted, my goodness, is it going to be an emotional roller coaster at these stadiums, arenas, and elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yep, can't wait. I'll want to go as a fan to kind of celebrate with everyone else. And certainly, I know speaking for you too, Alex, we can't wait to get behind the board or put a headset on and finally get back to what we love to do.
Amen to that. Well, David, thanks so much for joining, and we will have you again soon. If you don't mind, I'd love to have you back on.
Absolutely. Yeah, please stay in touch.
Will do. I'm Alexander Garrett. Talk to you soon.